So the president and my vision for the future also means lowering costs for Americans. Today we learned that last month our economy had 0% inflation. In July, we saw a drop in gas prices and a range of other goods like clothing and airfares and household appliances, which means more money in the pockets of working families.
Hi, welcome back to Father and Son Investing. Wait a minute, what did the Vice President just say?
Today we learned that last month our economy had 0% inflation. Today we learned that last month our economy had 0% inflation.
All right, welcome back for real this time to Father and Son Investing. Today we're going to talk about that 0% inflation that the Vice President was talking about. What did she mean, 0% inflation? Is that the way that you feel right now, like there's 0% inflation going on? We'll talk about the technicalities of what she's talking about, and then we'll talk about what the inflation numbers really look like. To me, it's kind of like saying kissing your sister. You know, it's a kiss, but it's your sister. And I think that's ultimately what those recent inflation numbers are going to look like. So let's get into this. If you're not familiar with how inflation is calculated in the United States, it comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Each month, they do a survey of a certain number of Americans and the purchases that they're making. Now, these are standardized so that they can compare region to region and one time period to another time period. Periodically, they will adjust those to make sure that it's accurate in terms of where people are spending their money. But otherwise, we're looking at kind of a standardized list. Now, on August 10th of this year, so just a couple of weeks ago, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released the latest Consumer Price Index summary, informing us as Americans and people around the world what inflation looked like here in the United States. Now, before I leave you in suspense any longer, let me just tell you where Vice President Harris got this 0% inflation number. This is it right here. This July 2022 for all items 0.0. That's where she came up with 0.0%. Now, just like any good politician, they can always spin numbers, and what they did leave out, though, is that the inflation rate for the past 12 months, that is from July 2021 to July 2022, 8.5%. Now, that's why it feels like you're spending more money, because you are. But in July, compared to June of 2022, it is true, the inflation rate between June and July of 2022 was 0%. That's why I say it's kind of like kissing your sister. Yeah, it's a kiss, but it's your sister. Now, in her talk, she did reference some areas where things had improved, but remember, it's a month-to-month improvement and not a year-over-year improvement. And so we can see that energy, 4.6%, it was down 4.6%. Cool. Fuel oil down 11%. That's really cool. But let's look at the last 12 months. Energy up 32.9%. Fuel oil up 75.6%. So the stink didn't get any worse, but it still stinks. The Vice President also mentioned transportation services, and it is correct that airline fares did come down a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So if we look at transportation, it did come down 0.5% compared to June, but remember, it went up 2.1% in June, so it still stinks. And overall, it's up 9.2% year over year. So the Vice President did make a true statement that the inflation rate between June and July was 0%, but let's just look at some of these numbers that they released in this statement. So let's just go ahead and look at some of these numbers. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, otherwise known as the CPI-U, was unchanged in July on a seasonably adjusted basis after rising 1.3% in June of 2022. Now, I already touched upon the year-over-year inflation rate, though, was 8.5%. That's before seasonal adjustment. Now, let's just dig down into some of these subcategories to decide whether, as Vice President Harris said, they are putting more money into the pockets of Americans. So let's just go to the first category here, gasoline. That interests a lot of Americans. Let's just look at the inflation rate for gasoline. Gasoline actually fell by 7.7% in July, and that really is what offset the increases in other categories that we'll talk about. Now, as we go along, I will also give you the year-over-year inflation rate so that you can compare and decide for yourself whether you feel like inflation is 0%. So the year-over-year inflation rate for gasoline, 44%. Ouch. Let's go ahead and talk about some other subcategories in the energy sector. How about electricity? Electricity was actually up 1.6%, and year-over-year, it's up 15.2%. How about natural gas? Well, natural gas did decline. It's down 3.6% between June and July, but year-over-year, it's up almost 31%. All right, how about food? That's probably another big category that Americans care about. The price of food. Well, that one did go up, and remember it was the decrease in energy expenditures that were helping to offset this, but the price of food, as you've noticed when you go to the grocery store, is definitely up. 1.1% between June and July, overall 10.9% year over year. But let's dig down into some of these categories of food. Flour and prepared mixes, up 22.7% year over year, up 4% in just 1 month. How about meat, poultry, fish, and eggs? That was up 0.6% between June and July. It's up 10.9% over the last 12 months. How about dairy and related products? That's up 1.7% month to month, and it's up almost 15% year over year. And let's just finish this off with beverages. That's something we all care about. Non-alcoholic beverages and beverage materials, up 13.8% year over year, up 2% between June and July. And if you're a coffee drinker, wow, up 20.3% year over year and up 2.7% in just 1 month between June and July. All right, we've talked about food and we've talked about energy. Let's talk about all items less food and energy. So those rose 0.3% in July compared to June, and the previous month had risen 0.7% in June. When we're looking at the shelter index, that continues to rise, but it did post a smaller increase than the prior month. Again, like kissing your sister. Let's look at medical care, another thing that people care a lot about here. That rose 0.4% in July after it rose 0.7% in June. So it stinks. It doesn't stink quite as bad, but it still stinks. Are you paying for car insurance? Well, that went up. The index for motor vehicle insurance, that went up 1.3% in July after it went up 1.9% in June. That insurance is definitely not putting more dollars into the pockets of Americans. Household furnishings and operations, that's up 0.6%. Planning on buying a new vehicle? Well, that went up 0.6% in July as well. If you're into alcohol and tobacco, well, that's up 0.5% and 0.3% month over month, respectively. Now, let's just finish up by talking about the decrease in airline fares that the Vice President mentioned. Now, that was down 9.6% from June to July, but she also didn't mention that it's up 27.7% from July last year to July this year. So, while I applaud the Fed for getting that inflation rate month to month between June and July of 2022 down to 0%, good for them, I don't think it's anything to get too excited about yet, especially when we dig into some of these subcategories. Yes, the price of airfare did come down. Okay, the price of appliances did come down. But in categories that we really care about, food, medical expenses, we're still seeing increases here. And when we compare that year over year, the inflation rate overall is 8.5%. But as I mentioned, for food, it's 10.9%. And for gasoline, we're still looking at 44%. The next video out is going to talk about why March and September are important months if you are an I-bond investor. I hope this information was helpful for you. If it was, please give us a thumbs up. We really need that for our channel. And until next time, enjoy your investing, and I'm sorry about the inflation.